Lots of people refer to Shadow of Chernobyl as the most polished, put-together Stalker game. This is especially true when you consider all of the game's features and options. But one major thing overlooked by GSC and later titles is the expansion of the PDA. To stop beating around the bush, I mean in particular the Encyclopedia. You get articles, new bits of information about any and absolutely everything you encounter, anomalies, artifacts, locations, enemies, concepts. You get a list of top stalkers in the zone to curry competition and understand your ranking better. There's even a system that counts your mutant and stalker kills, but this one was understandably cut a little. With the entire PDA tutorial given to us by Sidorovich, it's an incredibly good world-building experience that is later dumbed down. The question is, why? Was it considered not feasible, not worth the time and effort, or simply useless? Do players not like to read and immerse themselves in the lore? Whatever the reason, it happened anyway. More PDA features were planned for Clear Sky, if we believe this user, but I see no reason not to, as these features had already existed in Shadow of Chernobyl. There's a few minor differences in the PDAs between all three of the games, but none of them were as fleshed out as they were in Shadow of Chernobyl. There's even a diary, and for what little information we know about ourselves from the beginning of the game, every tiny piece of information that can be scrutinized is very helpful. It talks about getting rescued, the dreams you have, various missions you go on. There's a wiki dedicated to these entries, but as always, the Russian one seems better informed. Journal. The next section, divided into two subsections, Journal and History. The first contains the necessary information from other PDAs and entered by the Marked One himself. The second section, the history of messages on the PDA and the Marked One's dialogues. It is quite possible that this section, in addition to the existing functions, was planned as a real diary of the player. Contacts. A section containing a list of stalkers within a 50-meter radius. It displays the group, reputation, attitude towards the Marked One, and the stalker's rank. It is one of the first sections created. Ranks. This displays a list of stalkers with the highest rating, starting at about 930. The list of names changes with each new game. Sometimes these stalkers can be met live, sometimes unique characters like Skull and Cap are included in the list. Killed stalkers have reddened photo icons. This section was most likely introduced later than all others. In Shadow of Chernobyl, it was planned that in the Contacts section, it would be possible to read the biography of any stalker with a unique name. These texts remained in the game archives. For those newbies just now coming into the zone, why not try to take advantage of everything that we can? There was obviously a point to include everything that was written here. We, the new players, are meant to immerse ourselves in this new world that we find ourselves in. These new creatures and objects that we see. This alternate reality that we find ourselves embroiled in. In my opinion, this just goes down to the lack of development for Clear Sky and Call of Pripyat. Shadow of Chernobyl took the most time in development. It had the most things planned for it. It had the most years put into it. Clear Sky and Call of Pripyat didn't, so naturally some things were rushed, some things weren't implemented, and like all games, some things were cut. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's rather just me pining after what we lost, what we could have had. Ultimately, I don't think I would miss it, but I don't understand why they would include it in Shadow of Chernobyl and then not keep it in the later games. You could draw some parallels between this and the detectors that you find in later games, but there were rough sketches of these in Shadow of Chernobyl by itself, so that's not really an argument either. It doesn't take that long to write some entries, some basic information, a summary of what you may encounter, what things are really, for games. So I don't understand why they would remove this. Now, the bit about adding portraits and having an entry for every single named stalker, that sounds a bit more intensive work-wise, but it still doesn't sound like it's not unachievable. However, this does come from a franchise and a studio that likes to go a bit too far and has to be, throttled by THQ, for example. in order to have the game even release at all, so I suppose I can understand if they go too far. Let's go back a bit. In Shadow of Chernobyl, you get this wonderful, amazing intro cutscene. You get introduced to everything, and you get a way to introduce you to even more things, the PDA. For these newbies, now seeing themselves as Marked One, entering the zone for the first time, why not try to take advantage of everything that we can? Now, there is a case to be made that removing these things makes it more difficult, but if that's so, why not just remove it entirely instead of having it in the first game and then watering it down in later games? But this just takes me back to the artifact detector analogy, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. And to be honest, I'm sure if you really think about it, there's plenty of other things you could draw conclusions between like these two. It could ultimately just be a matter of them saying, oh, we went too far with this, we should dial it back a little. All I'm saying is, it just doesn't seem fair. You could also argue that by Clear Sky and Call of Pripyat, they expect the player base to be more rounded and understand what they're getting into. However, with modern audiences, I don't think this will really be the case. But I suppose we'll see in November. Now, with all of the sneak peeks we're getting about Stalker 2, we are getting a lot of information about this game before it releases. GSC is definitely trying to build a lot of hype around this. And the PDA is no exception, although I hear it may be getting a little bit less action in Stalker 2. Purportedly. But what else will we see gone? There are already a few things mentioned, however. We do see a journal, an archive, statistics, a tutorial, and notes, so it won't be all bad, but this isn't the first time they've decided to cut things, so what else will we see removed? Of course, even with the removals, we will have mods in the future to add them back, whatever they may be, if that's what the community so desires, but I am curious to see GSC's vision in this regard. No matter how one may approach the series, be it Gamma, Anomaly, the original games themselves, no one can argue that Shadow of Chernobyl didn't have the most complete version of the PDA, and by extension, a very good lore-building device designed to help the player. With the precedent set by Clear Sky and Call of Pripyat, what do you think we'll get in Stalker 2? Do you think it'll be improved? Or do you think it'll be worsened? As always, if I've missed, glanced over, or neglected something entirely, please, let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave any comments below that you might like to do.